I have read 700 books since I started tracking the books I was reading on the website GoodReads in 2017. In this video, I'm going to tell you the top 20 books that I have read according to GoodReads. Welcome to my booktube channel, Jack and the Book Stack, where I talk about a wide variety of book genres and the bookish lifestyle. And you are really going to see what I mean by a wide variety of genres, because on this list of the top 20 books that I've read, they are all over the board when it comes to genres. Variety is the spice of life, and that's what we do here on this booktube channel. To create this list for you, I sorted the books in my read category on GoodReads, and I ranked them in order from the highest rated to the lowest rated. But then I have 3 sets of criteria that I added on in addition to that. First and foremost, these are all fiction books. And that's because when I looked at the list, about half of it was nonfiction, including a lot of biographies and memoirs. And I think that the discussion around nonfiction is very different because it takes into consideration if a book is interesting. A book can be interesting, but maybe it's not a favorite. Maybe it's not necessarily good, but it's interesting. And interesting is such a matter of perspective of what you're interested in. And it also felt really weird to talk about judging a book like a memoir about a person's life. So I didn't want to have that discussion in this video. That can be a separate topic if you are interested, but this list is only fiction books. The second criteria for this list is I am only looking at the first book in a series. There were a lot of sequels on this list, which makes sense because if you're picking up book 2 or beyond in a series, it's because you really enjoyed book 1. If someone didn't rate book 1 highly, they're not going to continue in this series. So it seems to really skew the results if those books are predestined to be favorites or rated really high. So we are only going to look at books 1 in series. The third and final piece of criteria is that I excluded books that had under 5,000 ratings. When you have a smaller sample size, it really skews the results. So I did exclude those books for this video. Going through these books, I'm not going to tell you the plots of them. I'm really going to focus on if I enjoyed them, if they're a favorite of mine, and if it is a good book. Because you can have a really good book but have it not be a favorite. Very different kind of perspectives here. Essentially, we're just looking at, can GoodReads be trusted? And that's something that I want to hear from you in the comments down below. If you use GoodReads or any other kind of reviewing platform, do the reviews and ratings make a difference to you when you are selecting your next read? Could a low rating dissuade you from picking up a book you would otherwise be interested in? And finally, I really want to know if your personal enjoyment of a book typically aligns with the ratings or not. A lot of times I feel like these ratings are just a popularity contest rather than a reflection of the book being really good. But it's so subjective. We're all here for fun. It's not that serious. But I really want to know your perspective and how you use and view ratings in the comments down below. All right, well, because I'm a rebel and I want to bend the rules, and it's my booktube channel, so I can kind of do what I want, I want to do a rapid fire honorable mentions category. Number 23 on the list is The Serpent and Wings of Night, which is a fantasy romance. I can see why it is rated very high. It is very popular, so this might be a reflection of hype, but I did find it very engaging, so I would say it is a good book if you like fantasy romance. And I enjoyed it. It's not a favorite, but I did enjoy it. I won't continue in the series because I didn't like book 2, but I can see why it's rated high on the list. Number 22 is the reason I wanted to do an honorable mention, because it is a crime that it is not in the top 20, and that is A Man Called Ove. This is a favorite of mine. It has to be in my top 10 favorite books of all time, so I'm shocked it's not rated higher. Not only is it a favorite, but it is a really good book. It is so well written, has such depth of emotion, so this should be rated higher. It's a crime. I want to speak to the manager of GoodReads. Number 21 on the list is The Book Thief. This is a historical fiction that really shocks me. It isn't higher on the list because it is so beloved, very emotional and impactful. So it is an amazing book. It is so well written, so creative. Is it a favorite of mine? No, but I did enjoy it. Now for number 20, for the best books that I've read according to GoodReads. It is Where the Crawdads Sing. Now this is one that I remember enjoying. It is not a favorite, but this historical fiction was so popular, and I think that's why it's rated so high. I think because it was part of Reese's book club, it was very popular. I'm kind of surprised it's in the top 20. I mean, I'm surprised from my experience with the book, but not surprised because it has a celebrity endorsement, and so that's kind of what happens. But I'm not trashing the book. I liked it. I just can't see myself rereading it, and it didn't really stick with me that long. So it does really surprise me that it is number 20 on the list. Number 19 is The Great Alone. This is another historical fiction. This one I really, really liked. I don't know if it would be in my top 10 favorites, but probably maybe top 30. So it is on the list of favorites, just lower priority. And it is also a really, really good book. So I can see why it is in the top 20 for the GoodReads rankings. Very emotional, very atmospheric with the setting too. Very emotional. Oh, ripped my heart out. So anything that rips my heart out is gonna be high on my list of enjoyment. Number 18 on the list is a cozy fantasy. This is The House on the Cerulean Sea, which I don't own yet, but I asked for it for Christmas, so really hoping that I get it. But this is definitely one that I loved. This is somewhere on my list of favorites, and it's just a really, really good book because it has so much charm and character and wholesomeness and, you know, creativity too, because it is a fantasy, a cozy fantasy. So I really enjoyed this. I thought it was creative. It does not surprise me at all that GoodReads considers this one of the best books that I've read. Number 17 is going to prove me to be a little bit of a hypocrite. The book on the list is Thousand Splendid Suns. Now, I just said if a book rips my heart out that it's going to be high on my list of favorites, and I'm going to make a liar out of myself because this one was so emotional, but I feel like this was one of those where the author is trying to torment the reader just for the sake of being tormented, and it felt too much like they were trying too hard for shock value. So this is not one of my favorites. I did not necessarily enjoy it. Is it a good book? It is beautiful. There's beautiful relationships, there's heartbreaking tragedy, great cultural insight. So I think it is a good book. I think it's worthy of high ratings on GoodReads. This is a great example of something that I agree it has a high rating for a reason, but I don't necessarily like it, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone because I don't like that kind of torture. Number 16 on the list of the best books I've read is another historical fiction. I think GoodReads really likes their historical fiction books. It is Beneath a Scarlet Sky. This is is it a World War II historical fiction? Which plays into my opinion because I'm really, really burnt out on war historical fiction in World War II, specifically historical fiction. So it is not on my favorites list. And as far as is it a good book? Absolutely. It's beautifully written, compelling story, so the plot's really good, the character's really good, so I'm not surprised it's rated very high. This is one I actually picked up because it had a really high rating on Amazon, I think, is where I saw it had like 5 stars on Amazon, which I mean isn't saying much because it's like 5 stars, the book was delivered in good condition, but that is like an area where I saw reviews that influenced me to buy this and read it. So fun fact about that. And it's funny because what I'm saying about being burnt out on historical fiction with World War II, I'm going to make a liar out of myself in a minute here. So I'm a hypocrite again. But yeah, this is one that I'm not surprised is rated so high on GoodReads, but it would not make my personal list of favorites, although I did enjoy it. The 15th best book that I've ever read is actually one of my all-time favorites. So it is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So not only is it a favorite, something that I loved, maybe in my top 10, top 20 for sure, but it's a good book. It is fantastic. This is a historical fiction that deserves to be on this list. deserves, everybody needs to read it. I'd recommend it to everyone. So I agree with Goodreads and all the ratings on this one. And obviously it's super popular on like Book Talk and everything. So I think that plays into a lot of it with like the popularity contest aspect. But this is a situation where you should believe the hype. The 14th best book that I've ever read, according to Goodreads, is A Game of Thrones. Now this would not make my favorites list. And okay, I hold a little bit of a grudge. That's because this has the reputation of being a fantasy, a grimdark fantasy. And I read it and there was only fantasy in like the prologue and like the last chapter. It read more like medieval fiction to me, and so I was mad because it didn't meet my expectations in that sense. But it did have fantastic characters, a plot that twists and turns and disgusts, so I can see why it's rated so high. And it's no shocker that Goodreads has this in the top 20 list because Game of Thrones is a phenomenon. So I can absolutely see why it's on the list, but it wouldn't make my list of personal favorites. Although, looking at it objectively, I did enjoy it. I think I rated it like a 3 stars. So I did enjoy it for what it was. It just didn't meet my expectations of fantasy. So there you have it. Number 13 is a book that I own, but I actually just lent out, so I don't have it here with me. It is a horror manga. It is Uzumaki. Is this a favorite? Yes, absolutely. Maybe like top 30, top 20 in that area. Definitely not top 10, but I enjoyed it very much. So creative. I loved the artwork in this. I wasn't used to reading manga. I'm still not. I'm kind of a newbie with manga. And I loved this reading experience. So I'm not surprised that it's ranked so high on Goodreads, because this is one I would definitely recommend if you want to be disturbed. Number 12 on the list of the best books that I've ever read is The Help. This is a historical fiction that I did enjoy, but it wouldn't make it on my list of favorites. I think this is another one that is kind of ranked so high because of a popularity contest, because the movie was a sensation. I enjoyed it. Am I surprised it's on the top 20 list? Does it deserve to be here? I don't know. I think it's a good book, but I don't know if it deserves to be rated in the top 20. Maybe top 50. See, the wishy-washy answers start coming as we get higher in the list because it gets difficult to talk about. The 11th best book I've ever read is a contemporary romance called Real. I love this. Rated at 5 stars. It's a favorite. I don't know where it falls on the list, but it is definitely on the list somewhere. And it is also a phenomenally well-written book. So I agree with this being rated so high. Very emotional, insightful, has so much representation in it that's beautiful, so much culture. I love it. I love it. It deserves to be in this list. We are now in the top 10 for the best books that I have ever read, and I am not shocked in the slightest to see this fantasy book on the list. It is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, book 1 in the Mistborn trilogy, era 1. Not shocked it's here because this trilogy is amazing, fantastic, innovative, emotional, groundbreaking, all the things. And so it is a favorite of mine if you couldn't tell. So happy it's here, and it's a good book. There's a lot of discussion out there if Brandon Sanderson can actually write. I think if you're interested in like prose and writing style, you might not enjoy him as much, but it's very straightforward writing style, which I actually really like. Really interesting characters. You just cannot top Brandon Sanderson's writing for world building and the magic systems that he creates. They're so complex. They have so many like rules, but they're so creative, and the visualizations that come along with it are incredible. So I am not shocked this is number 10 on the list. Just like I'm not shocked that number 9 is also by Brandon Sanderson. It is Tress of the Emerald Sea. It's a favorite. It deserves to be on this list. Is it a good book? Yes, but I do think it kind of lags in the middle. So it's a good book, but I wouldn't say it's a perfect book. But I am so happy this is on the list, and it's a 2023 release. So to get on this list and to get the ratings and reviews to make it on the list against other books that that didn't make the cut, I think is really impressive and good. But I mean, Brandon Sanderson also has like a cult-like following fan base, so I feel like popularity contest here as well for Brandon Sanderson books, but hey, I'm in the fan club, so I'm not mad at it. Speaking of massive author fan clubs, you know there has to be some Sarah J. Maas on this list. And that comes in the form of House of Earth and Blood, which is book 1 in a Crescent City series. This is a favorite of mine, but if you've been around the channel for a while, you'll know that book 2 is the worst book that I've read ever in my whole life. So I'm not continuing in the series. So I'm not like super anxious for, I think the book 3 comes out in like January. Yeah, I don't think I'll be picking that up. Is it a well-written book? Is it a good book? That's kind of subjective, really. I think it is a good book in terms of fantasy romance. But I think it can be really corny. I think it can be, like, the romance element can be a little bit cringy. So that is a really subjective answer, because even though it's a favorite of mine, I can acknowledge that it's not a perfect book. It has its faults. But I would probably recommend this to most people, so that's why it's kind of a wishy-washy answer again. Number 7 on the list of the best books I've ever read is Death Note Volume 1. This is a manga that I did enjoy. I thought it was super, super creative. I don't know if I'd put it on my list of favorites. And as far as it being a good book, I don't know if I can say yes on that. And it actually really shocks me that it's on this list. I know Death Note is very popular and it's good, right? But how did this beat out War and Peace, Pride and Prejudice? How did it beat out some of these other books that are not in the top 20 list? I don't know. I don't know how this happened. Number 6 on the list is a YA book, and it is The Hate U Give. Is this a good book? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely necessary, should be required reading in all schools. It was fantastic. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Is it a favorite? Yes. Probably top 40 or 50, I think. I don't know if it would break top 20, but this was very impactful. I think I read it in like a day, and I definitely sobbed. The struggle that was in there, it was so insightful, so beautiful. This one deserves to be on the list for sure. Number 5 for the best books that I've ever read is The Heart's Invisible Furies. Is this a good book? Absolutely. It totally deserves to be in the number 5 slot. This is fantastic, and it is one of my favorites. I really enjoyed it. And I know I said I wasn't going to talk about plot, but in this historical fiction, we follow one character from when they're in the womb, like from conception until their death. I was so connected to this character. I cried. I feel like I lived another life in this book. So it was so powerful. It deserves all the high ratings that it has. The 4th best book that I have ever read is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. Is this a good book? Absolutely. Is it a favorite? No. It's a historical fiction that kind of drug out a little bit to me, and while I learned a lot about these characters and sympathized with them, I just don't think it makes my list of favorites. But it is rated really high for a reason. I don't think it's necessarily because of hype, even though it's like part of Oprah's book club from 2021. I do think this is a really good book. So it deserves to be on the list. It just wouldn't be my personal favorite. Still one I think is worth reading though. Number 3 on this list is what I said earlier, how I was going to make a hypocrite out of myself. It is a historical fiction about World War II called The Nightingale. So I mentioned just a couple minutes ago that I'm kind of burnt out on World War II, and so I don't know if that can be like on a favorites list, but I really, really enjoyed this one. There's no rhyme or reason to this logic, right? It's not a science. I really like this one. Very emotional, and of course it is a very well done book. Very good book. I understand why it's rated so high. Yeah, The Nightingale I would definitely recommend. Show of hands, who is shocked by this number 2 best book that I've read because it's according to GoodReads? Fourth Wing. Okay, so this was one I rated it 4 stars. I thought it was good. I don't think it makes my list of favorites though. And is it a good book? It is not innovative. It's kind of a mix-up of a bunch of different plots that we've seen before, and the dialogue is so basic and juvenile and not good. But that being said, it's a good book in that you can really just dive into it and lose yourself in the story. So it's entertaining. It's not, I'm not going to say it's like a well done book, but it is wildly compelling and entertaining. Obviously popularity contests, this is like the definition, but hey, I'm not mad at it because I love people getting excited about books. I love the culture around that and just people being happy and excited. So I'm not mad at the wild popularity of this. I just like the marketing team of this book needs to be studied because the fact that this blew up so big is wild. So I'm not surprised this is number 2 according to GoodReads, although it wouldn't make my favorites list. We have arrived. Now is the time to talk about the best book I've ever read, according to GoodReads. Well, and maybe not ever, but maybe since 2017. You get what's going on here. You're not new. It is The Will of the Many. This is a fantasy book that I just read in October. I loved it, rated it 5 stars, so it would be on my favorites list. Is it a good book? Yes, but not perfect, if that makes sense. So I would definitely recommend it, but not to everyone. Like, it would be a select audience. So I'm actually surprised that it's number 1 on this list. It only has 7,000 ratings though at time of filming. So I think that could be really skewing the results because I don't know how this beat out Fourth Wing with like all the massive hype that has. Well, I guess with massive hype also comes like massive hate too. So I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. I am really shocked this is number 1 on the list, but it would make my personal favorites. I'm not sure where it would fall. Top 30? Maybe top 20? I don't know. There's some elements in it I really, really enjoyed, but it was a very long book with lots going on. Very complex, hard to follow at times. Part of the reason why I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. But yeah, that is number 1 on the list. That is the list. I'd love to hear from you if any of these shocked you or surprised you. Or is anything missing from this list you would have expected to see? If you've seen some of my vlogs, if you've been around for a while, you might have an idea of some books that I have read that aren't on this list, and we can blame GoodReads for that. But once again, I'm dying to know your perspective on GoodReads and other ranking and review type things for literature. So drop those comments down below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this video. Happy reading to you, and I'll see you next time.